Welcome to Planning Ahead with CMS. Today we're talking to Mark McMurray, a partner in our Scottish planning team, about changes to the use classes and permitted development rights that came into force in Scotland in March 2023. Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Nicola. It's great to be here.
No worries. So then, Mark, can you start by explaining to us what use classes are?
Of course. Use classes are essentially legal categories of land use whose primary legal purpose is to assist in determining whether material changes of use have or have not occurred. In Scotland, there are 11 use classes, which include food and drink, business, storage or distribution, hotels and hostels, houses, and assembly and leisure. The use class of a property determines what type of business or activity can be carried out there. For example, a property in a residential use class can only be used for residential purposes or a bed and breakfast. It should be noted that the use classes are not comprehensive and there will be some land uses which do not fall within the use classes.
Oh, that's interesting. So that's use classes. What about permitted development rights? How do they work in Scotland?
Okay, so turning to permitted development rights, they remove the need to apply for and obtain planning permission in relation to developments and circumstances specified in the legislation. In Scotland, there are a wide range of permitted development rights which cover a variety of different types of development. For example, permitted development rights could be used to build an extension to a house, install solar panels on a roof, or change the use of your property. Statutory undertakers and similar bodies also benefit from permitted development rights, and they are very important to their businesses. The scope of permitted development rights is complex and can vary depending on the specific circumstances of a development.
So can you tell us about the changes that came into force this year then that will impact on our towns and cities and how they operate?
Sure. The Scottish Government is carrying out a phased review of permitted development rights in Scotland, and many of the changes arose from that review. The change which probably attracted the most attention was the introduction into the use classes of a new Class 1A shops and financial professional and other services, which was essentially a merging of the old Class 1 and Class 2 into a single use class. The purpose of this was to enable greater flexibility on our high streets and help with vacancy levels that we see. For example, a shop that's struggling to make a profit could be converted into an accountant's office without the need for planning permission.
That's really interesting, and there's some parallels there with the change that has been made in England as well. So what about the changes to permitted development rights? What's happened there?
So the remaining changes in the legislation did relate to permitted development rights. The first was a new Class 11A permitted development rights, which essentially allows a building or part of a building currently within the new Class 1A or certain other uses to be changed into a Class 3 food and drink establishment. Now, this is designed to assist the hospitality sector which has faced a challenging few years. And another new permitted development right, which is also designed to support the hospitality sector, is a new Class 9L, which will make it easier for Class 3 food and drink premises or pubs to establish outdoor seating areas on public roads without the need for planning permissions, although the permitted development rights don't remove the need for roads approvals.
So that's great news for our town centres. Have there been any other changes?
Yes, the final change relevant to towns and cities that I wanted to highlight was that there's a new permitted development right under Class 11B, which allows a building or part of a building which is currently within the new Class 1A or Class 3 food and drink to be changed into a small-scale Class 4 business use. Now, this could help businesses to expand or relocate more easily and could also help to create more jobs in a variety of sectors.
So can you tell us about the changes to planning laws for electric vehicles?
Certainly, we have seen a rise in the number of electric vehicles or EVs over the last few years, but there are still challenges in relation to the necessary infrastructure. Now, there have been a series of changes to make the provision of EV charging infrastructure easier without the need for planning applications. For example, it will now be possible for EV charging points to be installed, repaired or replaced on established hard surface areas which are primarily used for lawful off-street parking, whereas previously this was only allowed on areas lawfully used for off-street parking. There are also new provisions for solar panels to be installed to assist with EV charging.
And what about ports? What's going on there?
So permitted development rights for port operators were extended and in some areas clarified. Now, the changes will enable further development in Scottish ports without planning permission, where these are connected to the provision of port facilities and services. And also clarifying that agents of the Port Authority can also benefit from these rights. Now, this more closely aligns ports with airports, just at a time when many of them have been working closely in connection with green free port bids.
That's great to hear. Thanks very much for your insights, Mark. I really appreciate you coming down and joining us today.
No, thanks, Nicola. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Planning Ahead with CMS. Please tune into our next episode where we will talk about permitted development rights in England.